There are stories that don't need many words to touch the heart. Just a look, an action, a promise never broken. Today's story is about Jack, a veteran, and Rex, a war dog who not only saved his life in battle, but also pulled him back from the edge of despair at home. Before we begin, please comment where you're watching this video, and don't forget to subscribe to join us for more touching stories about friendship, loyalty, and sacrifice. Let's begin. The courtroom that morning was strangely stifling. The air was weighed down not only by the poorly functioning air conditioning system, but also by the eerie silence that enveloped the spacious room. Under the pale fluorescent lights and an old wooden benches packed with people, even breathing felt compressed within one's chest. All eyes were fixed on the center of the room, where a man in uniform sat silently in a wheelchair, both hands tightly gripping the chain wrapped around his right wrist. At the other end, a German shepherd with a straight posture, cold yet calm eyes, quietly observed everything happening, as if understanding better than anyone else. Rex wasn't an ordinary dog. He was large with a broad back, muscles clearly defined beneath his thick, sleek, dark gray and black coat, yet not rough. His ears stood erect, always ready to listen to the slightest sound, and his amber brown eyes, intelligent, sharp, always scanned around before settling on Jack's face. On Rex's chest was a black military collar with a name tag faded by time, along with a few small scars scattered near his ears and front legs, remnants of real battles. He sat close beside Jack like a shadow, a silent guardian who never abandoned his post. His name was Jack Dawson, a former Special Forces soldier who had served 3 tours in the Middle East. But what war left him couldn't be measured in medals. One leg lost after a roadside explosion, his psyche eroded by nightmares and horrific memories. If not for Rex, the service dog who had stood by him for over 4 years, he would likely have ended his life on a lonely night, rather than sitting here, fighting to keep the only friend he had left. On the high bench, the elderly judge with resolute eyes looked down, his face showing no emotion. He held a thick folder, flipping through the pages. Behind him, the American flag hung on the wall, fluttering gently in the current from the ceiling fan. No one spoke, only the even, dry breathing and the light tapping of Rex's claws on the tiled floor as he shifted position. Jack raised his face. His eyes were sunken but bright with life. He was no longer a warrior like before, but what remained in him was will and loyalty to Rex and to the person Rex had helped him find again. He swallowed hard, then spoke, not loudly, but echoing throughout the room because of the weight of each word. "Your Honor, I know the regulations. I understand that Rex is military property, that he has been assigned a number, enlisted, and now, after all he has contributed, he will be reassigned. But please understand." Jack paused a bit, his lips trembling. He tightened his grip on the chain as if to keep himself from breaking down. "Rex is not a number. He is my family. He's the only thing keeping me from the edge of the abyss." No one moved. A woman sitting in the third row lowered her head, wiping away tears. Beside her, a veteran wearing an old jacket nodded slightly, as if deeply understanding every word. Jack continued, this time his voice slower, deeper. "On the battlefield in Kandahar, we were ambushed. 3 people in the team died on the spot. I was hit by shrapnel, couldn't lift my leg. The enemy was closing in, and Rex, he didn't run away. He came back, bit into the strap of my body armor, dragged me across a ditch of earth and stones under gunfire. Without Rex, I would have died." The room remained silent, but something was moving in the eyes of the listeners, silent emotion beginning to spread like an oil slick on still water. Afterward, when I returned, Jack took a deep breath, his eyes lowering as if sinking into memory. "I wasn't myself anymore. Lost a leg, lost comrades, lost faith in everything. I once sat in my apartment with a gun in my hand. But Rex, he didn't leave. He lay by my feet for many hours, not barking, not whimpering, just silent. His eyes seemed to say, 'I'm still here. You're not alone.'" Jack paused, bowing his head. There were soft sobs in the room. Rex still sat there motionless, but his ears were up, eyes never leaving Jack, as if understanding that he was being talked about, and understanding how important this moment was. Rex didn't just save my life once. He has saved me many times, every day, every night, even after we were no longer on the battlefield. And now, Jack raised his head, looking straight into the judge's eyes. They want to take him away, give him to a new mission, a new person. But how can that be? He's not a backpack or a gun. He's the remaining soul of a broken soldier like me. The judge said nothing. He looked at Jack for a long time, then shifted his gaze to Rex. In the white light of the courtroom, Rex's military collar glimmered. The small scars around his ears and front legs were evidence of combat. Real combat, not training. A long silence. Outside the window, the morning sun shone through the large panes, creating streaks of light cutting across the dark wooden room. The leaves in the courthouse yard swayed gently, but inside the air remained heavy as lead. Jack didn't continue speaking. He had poured out his heart. He leaned down, placed a hand on Rex's head, gently stroking. "He's not property," he whispered. "He's the reason I'm still alive." And at that moment, it was neither Jack nor the judge, but Rex who was the center of the room. A silent creature who had lived and died alongside humans, now regarded as property. But no law could measure loyalty or friendship. And in that silent space, everyone felt it. Even those who had never understood before now saw something very real. A soldier's love for his dog cannot be severed by law or command. Jack didn't know what the court's decision would be, but he knew he had said everything, and he was not alone. Beside him, Rex still sat there, as he had always been, as he would always be. The atmosphere in the courtroom seemed to settle completely as the judge raised the file before him, preparing to announce the final conclusion. A few rustling sounds came from the back rows, attendees sitting up, tense as if waiting for the outcome of a battle without gunfire. Under the cold fluorescent light, every detail was harshly clear. The judge's resolute face, the deep wrinkles at the corners of his eyes, tiny dust particles floating, glittering through the slanted light from the high window. And in the center of the room, Rex's dark brown eyes suddenly standing like two flames waiting to ignite. No one had time to react before Rex jumped up. The motion was so decisive that the chain pulled Jack Dawson's wrist, almost making him lurch forward in his wheelchair. Rex let out a low growl, then barked loudly, the harsh sound echoing throughout the previously terrifyingly quiet space. Each bark was like a hammer blow against the silent wall, breaking the solemnity and arrangement of a court session that seemed predetermined. Ears fully erect, Rex's eyes were fixed on the large wooden door at the end of the room, where two guards stood still, not understanding what was happening. The entire courtroom seemed drained of air in an instant. Everyone stopped breathing, turning to look in the direction Rex was pointing. A few people in the front rows flinched, retreating backward, shoulders trembling slightly. The heavy wooden benches creaked, each sound becoming sharper and clearer than usual. No one spoke, because they all sensed something unnamed. Something was wrong. Jack looked at Rex, then followed the dog's gaze. He clearly felt the change in the air, the kind of feeling that only those who had survived ambushes would understand. It wasn't exactly fear, but a kind of instinctive alertness, as if every cell in the body was being switched to survival mode. Jack stammered, his voice almost a whisper, but still ringing clearly in the breathless room. "No, Rex only does this when he senses real danger." Rex wasn't barking wildly. The way he moved, the barking, the posture leaning forward, everything was very purposeful. This wasn't impulsive behavior, but a trained service reflex from hundreds of hours in combat environments. He was signaling, not to Jack, but to everyone in the room. A warning signal. The judge paused his announcement, still holding the file tightly. He frowned, looked at Jack, then shifted his gaze to Rex. His face gradually changed from confusion to alertness. Those wise eyes that had witnessed so many murder cases, so many lies, now began to show some apprehension. Not because of the dog, but because its reaction was unlike anything he had ever witnessed in a courtroom. A guard stepped forward a few paces, intending to calm Rex, but Jack raised his hand to stop him. Don't go near him," Jack said, this time firmly, his voice full of force. Rex isn't out of control. He only does this when he detects a threat. He turned his head to look directly at the door. His hands still gripped the chain, but he didn't pull. He knew well that Rex was doing what he was born to do: protect. The atmosphere in the room gradually shifted from confusion to suffocating tension. A few people began to whisper among themselves. There was the sound of a woman taking a deep breath, the sound of someone dropping a pen to the floor, ringing with an uncomfortably sharp clarity. Rex maintained his posture, his entire body tense, front legs slightly crouched, back arched like a bow ready to spring. His eyes locked on the door, where a small frosted glass window was mounted, and behind that window, no one knew what was there. Jack felt his back go cold. He had seen Rex like this before, not often, but always when life was truly threatened. He remembered a pitch-black night in the outskirts of Kabul. Rex had growled softly, just like this, only seconds before a mine exploded, just a few meters from them. The same look, the same resonating growl from the chest, and that almost supernatural focus. He swallowed hard, then spoke louder, this time for the entire room as a warning. Everyone should stay seated. Maybe Rex has just detected something we can't see. The judge signaled for another guard to move toward the door. The tall man, wearing a belt with a gun and baton, looked at Rex, then turned to the judge, waiting for orders. His face hardened, but his eyes wavered slightly. He must have heard or witnessed firsthand about service dogs like Rex who had detected threats that humans couldn't perceive with the naked eye. One step, two steps. The guard moved closer to the door. Rex let out another sound, this time deep and prolonged, like a final alarm before something happened. His growl was no longer an ordinary dog bark. It was a warrior's warning. Everyone in the room seemed held in an endlessly prolonged moment. A court session that was supposed to resolve an administrative matter was turning into a space suspended between order and chaos. The judge was no longer reading the file. The thin pages still lay before him, but his hands had been placed firmly on the table, palms pressing lightly, as if trying to stay calm. Jack didn't take his eyes off Rex, and for the first time since entering the room, he felt this courtroom could become the most dangerous place if Rex's instincts were once again correct. No one knew what was waiting behind that heavy wooden door, but the entire room had understood one thing. Rex had just saved them from complacency, and the storm had only just begun to rise. Rex continued to growl, a deep and profound sound from his chest resonating like an engine starting up. Each beat vibrating through the silence like water turning to ice. No one could mistake that sound for an ordinary bark. It wasn't a threat or an outburst of anger. It was instinct honed from hundreds of hours on training grounds, from facing death on the front lines. It was a warrior signal detecting danger. Rex's entire body was taut like a bowstring. 4 legs crouched low, back arched, neck fur raised. His amber-brown eyes remained cold and fixed on the large door at the end of the courtroom, where light from the hallway behind only flickered through the frosted glass. The once quiet space seemed split into 2 halves. One half where everyone was sitting, framed in order, light and law. The other half was that door, where darkness and the unknown waited. Jack still held the chain tightly, but his hand was sweating. He could feel the pulling force from Rex increasing, as if with just a slight loosening of his grip, the dog would charge forward, ready to fight. He didn't need to ask why. He knew this well. Too many times. The ambushes standing on mines waiting for rescue, bombs hidden under dry earth. Every time Rex had growled like this, and every time the nightmare had been real, a security officer in body armor stepped quickly toward Jack and Rex. His hand rested on the pistol at his hip, his eyes glancing toward the judge as if waiting for orders. "The dog needs to be controlled immediately," he said quietly but firmly, his voice echoing in the stillness like a warning. Jack immediately raised his hand, trembling but resolute. "No," he said, his voice low but carrying weight. "If Rex is reacting like that, there's a reason." He looked straight into the security officer's eyes, not with the gaze of a disabled person in a wheelchair, but with the eyes of a commander on the battlefield. Rex growled again, this time longer, more fierce. And then he barked once, sharp as a knife cutting through the air, causing a nearby woman to let out a small scream, instinctively clutching her purse as if it were a shield. People began to murmur, whispers, creaking chairs, shoes moving slightly, all blending into a wave of tension rising throughout the room that had been designed to maintain order and solemnity. The judge, who until then had maintained a cold face, had now changed his expression. He placed his hand on the table, tapping lightly 3 times as if to bring everyone back to reality. "Order," he said, but his voice was no longer as steady as before. He turned to Jack. "Mr. Dawson, your dog is disrupting the court proceedings." "No," Jack replied quickly, this time louder. He leaned slightly forward from the back of his chair, his eyes brightening. "He's warning us. Rex never loses control. He doesn't react to sounds, crowds, or commotion, only to real threats. Please, sir, I've seen this before, and every time something happens." At that moment, one of the 2 guards standing near the door suddenly moved, reaching for the door handle. The space seemed to freeze. Rex snarled and lunged forward, only held back by Jack's desperate grip. His head almost touched the floor, fangs bared, saliva dripping slightly under the tile. He would not allow anyone to touch that door. A woman in the back began to cry. A child trembled, burying himself in his father's lap. Those who had thought this was just a simple administrative case now saw clearly. Something was wrong. Not because the dog was going crazy, but because he had been too calm until this moment, and now his actions were too precise, too much like he had been trained for this situation. Jack knew he had no time left to persuade. He lowered his voice, looking at no one but Rex. "Hey, old friend, tell me, what do you feel?" His hand touched Rex's back, where the fur stood up like a porcupine's quills. The animal didn't turn its head, only growled, its eyes locked like a chain connecting its soul to something beyond the wooden door. A light breeze slipped through the gap under the door, cold and strange as if coming from a place that didn't belong to this building. And suddenly Jack felt a chill down his spine. There was no clear sound, no knocking, no footsteps, no one shouting. But he knew, just as Rex knew, there was something standing behind that door, something that shouldn't be here. The judge slammed his hand on the table, this time not tapping lightly anymore. "I order security to check the door." Immediately, 2 guards nodded. The one standing near the door placed his hand on his gun, the other reaching for the handle. Rex let out a sharp howl. Jack shouted, "Stop! Don't open it! If there's something on the other side, then—" But it was too late. The door handle turned slowly. The metal creaked distinctly, each notch like scratching against the tense nerves of the entire room. The door opened a small crack. Outside was the hallway. Dim lights, stillness, not a soul, no figure. But Rex didn't stop growling. And then, something made Jack stop breathing. Not an image, but a smell. A metallic scent wafting by. The smell of old gunpowder, mixed with dust. A smell that only those who had been on battlefields would recognize. A smell of death. He looked at Rex. The dog was tense like an arrow on a bowstring, every muscle trembling with tension, claws scratching lightly at the tiled floor. Jack didn't need to say anything more. No one still thought Rex was causing trouble, and no one still thought this was just an ordinary court session. Whatever was behind that door was a real threat, and the instinct of a 4-legged warrior had given the first signal. The courtroom door had barely opened, revealing a long, dark hallway. The fluorescent light outside pale and hazy, as if deliberately avoiding the gaze from within. No footsteps, no greeting, just darkness pooling in patches on the walls, and a cold draft slipping through the door crack, carrying a faint metallic smell, damp and alien. The guard backed away, eyes bewildered, while Rex growled fiercely, his body tense as if ready to charge at any moment. Then he appeared. From the hallway, a man slowly stepped in. His footsteps were so light they made no sound, as if he wasn't walking on feet but floating across the tiles. He wore a long, dark gray coat, slightly dusty at the hem, pulled up to his neck. The hood covered his head, revealing only his chin and mouth, pale skin and lips cold as stone. His face had almost no expression besides an eeriness that chilled to the bone, like someone too accustomed to others' fear and considering it a given. He stopped right at the threshold of the courtroom, where the ceiling light shone down just enough to reveal the lower part of his face beneath the hood. His eyes weren't clearly visible, but his voice rang out, deep, low, and completely controlled. "I don't come to harm." He slowly scanned the room. "I only came to take the dog back." The packed room suddenly fell silent, as if all movement had been frozen at once. No one understood what was happening. No one knew who this man was, why he walked into a strict federal court session as if he had his own key. But what made everyone choke wasn't this strange appearance. It was the way he said, "Take the dog back." Jack felt his heart skip a beat. He turned his wheelchair around, facing the man who had just entered. Still holding the chain tightly, but now his entire body was tense like a bowstring. Rex wasn't barking anymore, but growling steadily like a bomb waiting to explode. His eyes no longer looked at the door, but locked onto that man, as if the deepest instinct inside him had just identified a real enemy. The judge stood up abruptly, his hands slamming down on the wooden surface. "Who are you? Who authorized you to enter here?" His voice now lacked the decisiveness from before, mixed with a bit of wavering, like a chair wobbling on uneven stone floor. The man still didn't take his eyes off Rex. He even stepped forward, causing those sitting in the front row to back away. No one dared to remain seated anymore, not because they feared Rex, but because there was something about this man that made them want to retreat far away. A feeling difficult to name, as if he carried something not belonging to this world. "Rex," he said slowly, as if recalling a familiar name. "The boy has grown more than I thought, abilities far exceeding initial predictions." Then he turned to look at Jack, a thin smile flashing on his lips but bringing no warmth. "Mr. Dawson, very pleased to meet you again. I'm afraid we've never spoken officially, but I know you well, and you know the program I'm referring to." Jack gripped the wheelchair armrest tightly. He breathed heavily, as if each word the man spoke was a knife stabbing straight into memories he had tried to bury. But it was coming back, the Hades program. No one in the room understood his meaning. Only Jack, and Rex's eyes now seemed to reflect the fear in his master's heart. "Don't you know?" the man continued, his voice steady, almost gentle, like a teacher lecturing. "Rex is classified top-secret defense property, part of the Hades project, deep research on neural response capabilities, exploiting enhanced combat consciousness from canines. He is the most complete product of that project, and you were actually just the final testing phase." "Shut up," Jack whispered, but his voice contained a cold electric current. His entire body trembled, but not from fear, from anger. "I know Rex. I trained Rex from scratch. I was there when he first bled, when he learned to sense a mind from the way the wind changed direction. I don't need you to tell me, but you don't know everything," the man said, his voice gradually deepening. "You don't know that every time Rex warns, it's because special neural sensors have been activated. You don't know he was once used to lead counterterrorism operations that never appeared on any server. And you certainly don't know," he tilted his head, eyes flashing from under the hood, "that Rex surviving so long and developing like this is a danger, and I've been tasked with retrieval." The air in the room became thick, as if everyone was breathing something heavier than air. No one spoke, no one moved. A few people began to pull out phones, but were quickly asked by security to maintain order. The scene before them was no longer a court session, it resembled a confrontation, and the smell of war began to seep through layers of vests, through pairs of panic-filled eyes. Rex suddenly stood up completely, pulling the chain taut. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just tense like a living statue. Jack gripped the chain, feeling his heart about to shatter. He tilted his head to look at Rex, whispering, "Stay calm. We won't leave each other." The man stepped back, unhurried. The smile on his lips disappeared, replaced by a coldness like a razor. "We won't make it difficult for you, Jack. Hand Rex over to me, or both of you will be considered national threats." By now, no one remained seated. The entire room stood up, drawn into a situation no one had anticipated. A civil court, a veteran, a dog, and a man stepping out of nowhere with a story beyond imagination. But Jack didn't back down. He looked straight at him and slowly said, each word like a hammer firmly driving into the courtroom floor, "Rex isn't going anywhere." And in Rex's eyes at that moment, though without words the entire room clearly felt, that dog had also chosen which side he belonged to. And that was the side that still knew how to love him as a living being, not possess him as a living experiment. The battle hadn't begun, but the boundaries had been clearly drawn. The atmosphere in the courtroom was now heavy, as if everyone could feel a profound change taking place. All eyes were fixed on the long-coated man standing in the middle of the room, as if he were the key character in a play whose plot no one knew in advance. He had spoken words no one expected, making the entire room dead silent, like a time bomb counting down each second, waiting for the moment to explode. Project Hades. These words weren't in any books or files Jack had ever known, but the moment he mentioned them, Jack felt like a violent wave crashed over him. He froze, unable to speak, thoughts intertwining in his head. Was it really true? Had everything that happened around Rex had a reason he never knew about? Rex, the dog he had saved, who had accompanied him through every battle, every challenge, now turned out to be not an ordinary animal. He wasn't just a loyal comrade. He wasn't just a companion during dark nights when Jack faced his deepest loneliness. He wasn't simply a service dog. He was the product of a top-secret military program, a sophisticated fighting machine programmed to have the ability to sense danger beyond normal levels. He looked at Rex, unable to believe what he'd just heard. How? Why? And why, until now, did he himself know nothing about Rex's true past? He saw Rex sitting beside him, his expression unchanged, still calm, as if nothing was different. But in Jack's heart, everything was shattered. The man still maintained that calmness. He didn't change his attitude, just continued word by word, sentence by sentence, as if explaining a very simple issue. "Project Hades," he repeated, his voice showing no concept of causing disruption. "We trained Rex since he was a puppy. He's not just an animal. He has biosensing capabilities, can detect dangers from afar before they appear, can predict changes in the surrounding environment through unpredictable neural reactions. Biosensing. That feeling was like a knife stabbing Jack's heart, making him breathless. Rex, the dog he thought was his best friend, his most loyal teammate, was now part of a military training program. The dog who had gone through battles had saved him from danger, but it was all due to an experimental program he knew nothing about. Everything felt like a nightmare, turning upside down all he had known, had believed. Rex's actions now weren't spontaneous or instinctive, but pre-programmed. "Did you know that, Dawson?" He smiled slightly, not a smile of mockery, but like a deep understanding, as if he was sharing a secret too big that Jack had never fully comprehended. "You didn't know Rex was part of this project, did you?" He looked at Jack with cold eyes but full of calculation. "We've been monitoring you, monitoring Rex for a long time. He has the ability to react quickly to dangers that ordinary humans can't perceive. You've seen this on the battlefield, haven't you?" Jack looked straight into his eyes, unable to utter a word. He didn't know what to feel: anger, confusion, or a deep indignation. These emotions were twisting inside him. He had been deceived for a long time. He continued, "Rex isn't just a service dog. He's a biological weapon. He can detect dangers, potential enemies, even biochemical attacks. And he was created not just to protect people like you, but to protect national interests, to protect things you'll never fully understand. He's not a normal dog, Jack. He's part of the system." Each of his words was like a knife cutting through each layer of protection Jack had built over the years. He felt betrayed not only by those who had trained Rex, but by the very dog he trusted. He had dedicated his life to protecting Rex, but now everything had changed. Rex wasn't his alone. The word system echoed like an accusation, each syllable stabbed deep into Jack's heart, making him feel powerless, as if he had just been drawn into a game he couldn't escape. As soon as he finished speaking, he slowly pulled an object from his coat pocket, a metal key. It didn't look like anything Jack had ever seen. This key was made of a strange metal, shiny and very solid. He rotated the key between his fingers, unhurried, simply as if handling a familiar item. Rex, already tense, suddenly let out an extremely powerful growl, as if sensing danger from that key. His body contracted, all muscles tensed. His eyes didn't leave the key the man held in his hand, as if understanding clearly that it was the key to the end, to a change he couldn't prevent. And then the man turned the key. At first, just a small click, then suddenly the lights in the room went out. The entire room plunged into darkness. People in the room screamed, panicked, searching for light switches or any light source. Mobile phones were turned on, but the weak light from the screens only increased the feeling of tension and fear. Jack felt like he was in the middle of a nightmare when everything around him suddenly collapsed. In the darkness, there was only dim light from phones and shadowy figures. Rex growled in the darkness, but he no longer seemed like the animal Jack had known. He had been changed. He was no longer the loyal friend who had fought alongside him. Now Rex was a weapon, a creature that Jack himself couldn't control. And that was what the man in front of him had wanted all along. Complete control. Jack felt an ultimate fear. He wasn't afraid of the man, wasn't afraid of the darkness, but he was afraid he could no longer protect Rex. He was afraid that everything he had known was now just lies. In the moment darkness engulfed the courtroom, all sounds seemed amplified. The rustling of shifting chairs, women screaming in fear, children crying out. And in the midst of it all was Rex's fierce growl, resonating like thunder in a compressed sky. The fake tranquility had shattered. No one cared anymore what the court was judging, who won, who lost, because now everyone sensed something evident. Danger was present in this room, very close, very real. Jack still held the chain tightly, but not to restrain Rex, but as an instinct, as if the only thing keeping him anchored in reality was the connection between him and the creature he loved most. In the darkness, he couldn't see anything beyond flashes from phones, but his ears began to detect movement. Shoes sliding softly on the floor, heavy breathing being held back. And then the lights came on. Sudden light made everyone squint momentarily, but when they could see clearly around them, the entire room erupted in panic. Two masked, armed men had appeared behind the coated man. They were dressed in black from head to toe, faces covered with tactical masks, revealing only cold eyes devoid of humanity. In their hands were two compact rifles, the type used in close-range raids. They stood motionless, but full of menace, like two living stone statues, ready to act at just a nod. No one knew when they entered the room. No one heard the door open. They just appeared, as if the darkness had brought them in. Rex immediately lunged forward, the chain pulling him back just a few steps from Jack Dawson. The dogs snarled furiously, each bark bursting out like explosions, echoing off all four walls. His eyes blazed red, claws scratching hard on the floor, leaving streaks on the tiles. He wasn't afraid. He knew what was happening. The entire courtroom fell into chaos. The spectators frantically stood up, pushing each other toward the emergency exits. A man shouted, "Call the federal police! There are weapons in the court!" A woman collapsed under the benches, pulling her child into her arms, trembling in prayer. But no matter how many people were afraid, it was the cold silence of those three, especially the coated man, that truly made the atmosphere terrifying. He wasn't rushing. He raised his hand, stopping the two behind him. "No one has to die if we get what we need," he said, his voice as even as before, neither high nor low, but every word as sharp as a knife. "We're here only to recover a defense asset that has escaped control. Everyone here's a witness. Don't make it harder. At that moment, one of the two guards, the large man who had stood near the door throughout the trial, suddenly turned to look at Jack with a strange expression. He wasn't panicked like the others, didn't draw his gun, didn't shout. He just silently stood there, as if waiting for a moment from long ago. And then he stepped back, his hand touching his belt, removing a small communication device from his ear. His face no longer showed the tension of someone protecting the law, but the look of someone dropping a roll. Jack looked at him, his heart leaping violently. "No, it can't be." The coated man turned his head, his eyes glancing over the guard, nodding slightly with hidden meaning. "He's been ours for a long time, matey," he said to Jack, no longer hiding anything. "You think you and Rex lived peacefully for 2 years by coincidence?" "No, Jack. We've been tracking your every step. We know where you go, what you eat, even what you dream each night. And he was the most important link." The guard stepped forward, his eyes meeting Jack's just for a moment. In that look, there wasn't a drop of regret, just an emotionless emptiness, a person who had left behind everything human. Jack felt like he'd been punched in the chest. He gripped the chain in his hand until his knuckles turned white. And then one of the masked men raised his gun, stepping forward, too quickly. Rex roared, jumping forward just as the man aimed his gun directly at Jack. There was no time to think, no time to call for anyone. Only Rex, like instinct, like fire and blood, throwing himself in front of Jack, his body spreading wide like a living shield. The gun didn't fire, but in that brief moment, everyone thought it would. The masked man was unexpectedly pushed back a step by Rex, staggering, the gun veering off course. Rex didn't bite, didn't attack. He just stood between the enemy and the person he loved, growling with authority. His large body completely covered the front of the wheelchair, his claws slipping slightly on the floor due to the extreme tension. A few other security personnel, only now regaining their composure, drew their guns from holsters, but no one dared to shoot. The space was too tight, too crowded. And all eyes once again turned to Rex. Jack whispered, not loud enough for anyone but Rex to hear. "Thank you, old friend." His voice faltered from emotion, from anger, and from the nameless pain of realizing he and Rex were being forced into a battle they never chose. The coated man stepped forward again slowly. "Jack," he said, "don't make this harder. Rex isn't a dog anymore. He's a device, a tool. He doesn't know love. He doesn't know how to choose sides." Jack raised his head for the first time. His eyes showed no fear, no suffering, but coldness, full of determination. "You're wrong," he replied. "Rex isn't a tool, and he just showed you that." No one in the room doubted anymore. It wasn't someone holding a dog. It was a dog protecting the entire room from those who were no longer human. And this battle, if it began, wouldn't simply be about reclaiming an asset, but about reclaiming choice, love, and the only thing left in a world full of deception: loyalty. Rex's growl still echoed in the space when an unusual silence once again pressed down on the entire courtroom. The faint smell of gunpowder, cold sweat, and confusion mixed together to create a thick, suffocating atmosphere. Everyone seemed held in place by an invisible hand. No one dared move, no one dared speak. All eyes were directed toward the center of the confrontation, where a man sat in a wheelchair, hand gripping the chain tightly, positioned between Rex and the 3 armed intruders. Jack wasn't trembling, though his knees had no feeling, though his back ached from tension, his eyes burned like fire. His heart pounded in his chest, but each beat was a silent declaration. "I am still alive, and I will not let anyone take away the last friend I have left. He is my family." Jack's voice grew hoarse from restraint, but clear and decisive. "Want to take him? Over my dead body first." Rex's eyes flickered slightly at Jack's words, but his body didn't leave its defensive position. He still stood tall, upper jaw curled to reveal sharp white teeth, front legs crouched low, as if carrying the weight of the world on his back. The man in the coat chuckled, but his smile contained not a trace of humanity. He took another step forward, standing just a few meters from Jack, bending his head slightly as if engaging in a private conversation. "You think you're fighting for friendship, for loyalty," he said slowly, his voice soft as a breeze, but each word like a blade. "But in reality, you're holding on to a danger greater than yourself." Jack didn't respond. His eyes remained locked on his opponent, unwavering. "Rex isn't an ordinary dog, Jack," he continued, his voice deepening. "He's a living database, a strategic-level biological sensing tool. He remembers. He learns many times faster than any creature we've ever seen. And worst of all, he's learning to resist. He doesn't just know, he's understanding." A moment of stillness passed. The people at the back of the room had now retreated to the walls, holding each other, trembling. Some began live streaming, others praying silently. All understood that any wrong move, even just a slip of the hand, could turn this place into a sea of blood. "Keeping him will implicate you," the man emphasized each word. "He's no longer a harmless creature, he's a threat." Jack let out a bitter laugh, the harsh sound rising in the heavy room. "Sounds familiar, just like how you people called soldiers like me when we were no longer of usable value. When we started asking questions, when we returned, broken." The man didn't answer. Jack continued, his voice seeming to reverberate off the old wooden walls, shaking the entire audience. "I've seen Rex save people. I've seen him shield children, teammates. I've seen him pull bodies from bomb buildings for 2 days without rest. And you dare stand here and call him a threat just because you can't control him anymore?" Rex tilted his head slightly, glancing at Jack with quiet, bright eyes. That moment, though brief, had an invisible connection passing through that gaze. Something that needed no language, that everyone could feel. Absolute trust. The coated man silently looked at the two masked men standing behind him. He nodded slightly, an almost imperceptible nod. And then, one of the two stepped forward, raising his gun, aiming directly at Rex. Jack shouted, "Stop! Back off! Not one more step!" The man raised his hand, signaling to stop. The masked man halted like a machine. "We don't want to kill anyone," he said. "But if Rex doesn't cooperate, we have no choice." Jack shook his head. "He's not your property. He's a living being. And I swear to God, I will stop you at any cost." Rex growled again. This time, the sound wasn't just a warning. It was a vow to fight. From deep in his throat, the growl rolled like winter thunder. His entire body tensed, eyes blazing. And at that moment, everyone saw clearly. This dog needed no commands. He had chosen his side. "He saved me," Jack continued. "On the night I was going to pull the trigger and end everything. I sat there, gun on the table, tears flowing, no one beside me. But Rex sat still, resting his head on my leg. Not barking, not whimpering, just sitting. And I put down the gun because of his eyes, because of the way he believed I would get through it." His voice broke. He inhaled, keeping calm, then emphasized each word. "He saved my soul. He's not a machine. And I won't let anyone turn him into a commodity." A moment of silence. The entire room held its breath. The coated man for the first time stepped back. His eyes wavered. Jack, though unable to stand, though his legs were paralyzed, at that moment, the entire room saw. He had stood up, with everything he had left. And Rex, the four-legged warrior, still stood right beside him, waiting for orders, or to fight, or to die together, but certainly never to leave each other. The cool air conditioning from the ceiling still blew steadily, but no one felt its comfort anymore. In the courtroom now, the air was thick as battlefield smoke, so tense that even breathing became heavy. No more discussion, no more typing sounds from the clerk's machine, no sound except rapid breathing, chaotic heartbeats in the chests of those witnessing a fragile moment between life and death. Jack still sat motionless in his wheelchair in the center of the courtroom, his body seemingly turned to stone. His hands still gripped Rex's chain tightly, his palm white from squeezing too hard. But not from fear, but because he knew what was about to happen. One wrong move, one wrong look, one offbeat breath. Everything would push them past the point of no return. In front, the three armed men stood in a triangle formation, The coated man, still playing the commander, didn't move. The other two masked men, living machines with modern weapons, were aiming at Jack and Rex. And this time, no orders were given, no negotiation, no bargaining. Everything had gone too far. In Jack's heart, a decision formed, one he never thought he would be forced to make. He looked down at Rex, saw the dog's eyes carefully watching every slightest movement of the opponents. His entire body taut as a bowstring, not fear, but waiting for orders. But what orders? Fight? Sacrifice? Jack swallowed hard. He whispered just loud enough for Rex to hear. "I'm sorry, maybe this time we won't make it back." He began to loosen his grip, his palm sliding slightly along the chain, like a silent goodbye. That was the signal, the surrender, the final act of someone who was once a soldier, now returning to being an ordinary person, trying to protect the only thing he still cherished. He intended to release the chain. If he could trade his life to save Rex, he was willing. If he could make them spare the dog, by any means, he would accept. But Rex didn't wait for that command. The moment Jack's hand just loosened the chain, as if sensing the unspoken, Rex acted on his own. A roar tore through the suffocating air. Rex launched himself from the ground, his body weighing over 40 kilos, flying like an arrow straight into the nearest masked man. The first impact sent the gun in his hand flying, dropping to the tile floor like a meaningless piece of metal. Rex didn't stop. With a precise movement as cruel as it was exact, he bit hard into the remaining gun-holding wrist, causing the second man to scream in pain. Blood spurted out, staining the black sleeve of his arm. Screams erupted throughout the room. Those in the back began to flee, pushing to find escape routes. Chairs crashed, files scattered. A few security officers raised their guns but didn't dare shoot, because Rex and the enemies were tangled in a blurred, chaotic, and deadly collision. The coated man jerked back a step, his face showing emotion for the first time since appearing. Astonishment. He hadn't expected Rex to attack proactively. He hadn't expected that reaction to come not from a command, but from instinct. The instinct of a warrior born not to obey, but to protect. Rex didn't stop after taking down two. In less than 10 seconds, he had closed in on the third man. The coated man managed to pull out a metal object from his pocket. Not a gun, but a handheld control device. A small switch emitted flashing red light. He pressed it. A beep sounded. Rex froze for a heartbeat, as if receiving an electric shock. His body jerked slightly. His eyes blinked, his throat emitting an unstable growl. Jack shouted, "Rex, don't let it control you!" Rex retreated half a step. His legs trembled, as if inside him were two conflicting commands, one from his program past, one from his present named Jack. For a moment, the packed room was silent to the extreme, with only Rex's panting breath, the still blinking control device, and Jack's pounding heart. Then, Rex let out a deep, powerful hiss. His eyes brightened again. He looked at Jack, then at the device in the coated man's hand, and he made his own final decision. Rex charged forward, leaping high, like a black shadow carrying extraordinary speed and power. The control device fell to the floor, shattering. The coated man was pushed onto his back, his head hitting hard against a wooden bench. His hands flailed, clawing at the air, but Rex stood blocking on his chest, teeth gripping his sleeve, not tearing flesh, but not letting go. One of the security officers seized the opportunity, rushing in to subdue all three men. In the next few seconds, an entire rapid response team burst in, guns ready, signaling everyone to lie down. The chaotic scene was quickly cleaned up. Weapons were kicked away, the intruders were handcuffed, lying prone on the floor, and Rex, still holding position, panning but eyes never leaving Jack for half a second. A strange silence fell. Then, the entire room simultaneously looked at Rex. Not a bark, not a shout, but in the gaze of dozens of people, from civilians to the judge, from security to court staff, everyone understood clearly what had just happened. Rex didn't run. Rex didn't hide. Rex didn't need orders. Rex chose to stay. Rex chose to fight for the person he loved. And that wasn't survival instinct. It was the instinct to protect someone he considered family. Jack couldn't speak. His throat was tight with emotion. He reached out toward Rex, and that brave dog moved closer, gently resting his head on Jack's leg, as if to say, "Everything's okay. I'm not going anywhere." And in that moment, there was no more war, no more top-secret projects, no more those who commanded and controlled. There were only two lives that had gone through hell, sitting beside each other in a devastated courtroom, holding on to each other as the only way to exist in this world that had already been too unjust. The courtroom still carried the smoke of the chaos that had just passed. Invisible smoke permeating the air, in the eyes, in the trembling, clenched fists of those who witnessed. Ordinary people who never thought they would see such a moment in real life. Soldiers from the rapid response team were still securing the doors, weapons ready. Some injured were being temporarily bandaged, overturned chairs scattered across the tiled floor, papers and files blown about by the fan like echoes of the storm. At the center of everything, Rex stood close to Jack, his shoulder lightly brushing against the wheelchair. His body was still tense, chest heaving with rapid breaths, the enemy's blood still lightly staining his muzzle and chest. But his eyes, deep, alert, and bright as embers, remained fixed on Jack, as if saying, "Everything's not over yet. We're still not safe." The coated man who had been knocked down earlier was now being pinned to the floor by two officers, his wrists cuffed behind his back, his face slightly scraped from hitting the edge of the witness stand. But his eyes hadn't wavered, still cold, still looking straight at Jack and Rex, as if he were still the one holding the advantage. An officer tried to pull him to his feet, but he turned his head, looking at Jack with a very different expression. A kind of deep coldness, not of someone defeated, but of someone waiting for another opportunity. "You think this is over?" he said, his voice still even, still deep, though blood trickled slightly from his lower lip. "This is just the first chapter." No one answered. He smiled slightly, then raised his head to look straight at Jack, his voice steady as nails being hammered into wood. "We will be back. Rex is a strategic asset. No one is allowed to keep him longer than the predetermined time." The entire room seemed to pause. "He's not just a dog. You know that better than anyone. He has neural data, sensory reflexes, the ability to sense biological fluctuations that no current artificial intelligence system can do. He is the divine eye that military programs have failed for decades to build. And you sit there, believing you can keep him like a pet?" Jack didn't answer immediately. He took a deep breath, his eyes scanning the devastated scene, then returning to look at Rex. The dog still stood there, not retreating, not hiding behind him, not trembling. He still stood straight as a guardian, though no one commanded him, though he knew he would pay a price for breaking the threat of fate others had placed upon him. Jack sat up straight, his hand slowly tightening the chain again, not to hold Rex back, but to affirm to all those present in that room, and to all the forces out there watching. "Rex doesn't belong to anyone," he said firmly, each word sharpened through countless losses, survivals, and revivals. "He's not a device, not property, and certainly not merchandise that you can order to be recalled like a malfunctioning drone." The coated man sneered, though his mouth still bled. "So what do you plan to do, Dawson? Keep him in a tattered apartment? Run all your life? A crippled veteran and a lost product? You can't beat the system." Jack looked at him without blinking. "I don't need to beat the system. I just need to keep my promise." The air in the room began to move, slow and heavy, like water after a storm but still rippling with whirlpools. Some security personnel began to withdraw, judicial police escorting civilians out of the courtroom in silence. Some eyes still turned back to look at Jack and Rex before stepping out the door. A few of them nodded silently, not because they understood the whole story, but because they knew loyalty like this deserves respect. The judge had left the bench, his face pale, lips pressed tight. But before stepping through the back door, he paused, turned his head, his eyes resting on Rex, said nothing, just slightly bowed his head. A small gesture, But within it was a recognition that an entire complex system out there could never utter. The coated man was pulled to his feet. Before being led away, he looked back, growling at Jack. "He will cost you everything." Jack nodded, as if he had known that for a very long time. "If I lose everything but keep Rex by my side, at least I still have something worth living for." A gentle breeze from the ventilation system blew through the ceiling gap, ruffling Jack's hair, fluttering a few pieces of judgment papers scattered on the floor. In his hand, the chain trembled slightly as Rex sat down, no longer in a fighting stance. But though his body relaxed, his eyes still watched the hallway ahead, where the dark figures had just been led away. He knew this battle wasn't over. Jack leaned forward, his hand resting lightly on Rex's head, fingers gently stroking through fur still dusted with grime and dried blood. He spoke softly, where only Rex could hear. "No matter what happens next, I won't leave you, I promise." And Rex, as if understanding every word, tilted his head slightly, rubbing gently against Jack's hand. That was the price of loyalty. Not in blood, not in life, but in choosing the right person, staying in the right place, and not leaving, even when the whole world threatens to tear apart everything they have. Rex didn't choose freedom, Rex chose Jack. And Jack would pay with everything he had left, as long as no one touched that sacred bond. The courtroom that once echoed with arguments, fear, and the warning growls of a dog now became so quiet you could hear a pin drop. The echoes of the storm that had passed still marked everywhere. The claw marks of Rex on the tile floor, a chair knocked over leaning against the wall, scattered document papers no one had picked up. The ceiling lights flickered, as if still unstable after the incident, shining down on an empty and messy space, as if it too was tired from witnessing too much in what should have been an ordinary morning. The judge had left. Police, security personnel, and the panicked crowd had also been escorted outside. The intruders were silently taken to federal headquarters, but with faces showing no signs of defeat, as if what had just happened was only a test. A gentle warning. Security cameras were still recording from hidden angles, but no one cared about the lenses anymore, because the most important things had been etched into the minds of those who remained. The truth wasn't on paper, but in the gaze of a dog and the soldier he had chosen to stay with until the end. Jack still sat in the middle of the courtroom, where everything began, also where all facades were stripped away. His old wheelchair now seemed an inseparable part of him, blending into his body after years of acceptance and living with limitations. But now it was no longer a symbol of loss. It was the beginning of a new promise. Beside him, Rex didn't lie down as usual. He still sat, back straight, head slightly tilted toward the large door where the stranger had once entered, like a ghost. His ears stood upright, no longer tense as when fighting, but not relaxed either. He wasn't looking at Jack. He was looking ahead, watching, observing, waiting. Jack understood that look, the gaze of a warrior who never turns his back, even when the battle has temporarily paused. His hand reached out, resting on Rex's neck, gently stroking down the dust-covered back with small scratches from the previous confrontation. His palm touched the warm, smooth fur, and in that moment, all fear, pressure, and anxiety dissolved into that simple feeling. The feeling of being beside the one thing that never betrayed him. "You've saved me so many times, Rex," Jack whispered, his voice hoarse and heavy, but warm as embers after a fire. "This time, it's my turn." Rex didn't react, just took a slight breath, then returned to his familiar motionless posture, like a statue guarding the threshold of the world he was ready to sacrifice himself to protect. The midday sun filtered through the high window panes, shining diagonally onto the tile floor, creating a thin golden strip running across Jack's wheelchair wheel, casting a long shadow at Rex's feet. That shadow wasn't clear, wasn't sharp, but strangely powerful, like the relationship between them, needing no title, no oath, but always clear, always enduring. Jack sat there for a long time, perhaps minutes, perhaps hours. In his head were hundreds of unanswered questions. What would happen next? Would they be hunted? Would the government order their arrest? Would there be others, more dangerous, more sophisticated, coming for them? In Rex, was he truly safe with him? Or would this very friendship be the reason both became targets? But then he sighed. All those questions, though real, though frightening, weren't as important as what he had just felt in that vital moment. Rex had chosen. No one programmed him to love. No secret project taught him how to lick the trembling hand of a veteran on the night he intended to end his life. No one ordered him to shield bullets. No one could control the way he looked at Jack, as if the whole world had only him worth living for. Jack turned to Rex, smiling slightly. "We won't run, you know. We'll live, and if necessary, we'll fight. But we won't run." Only now did Rex turn his head, his gaze softening, then gently pressing his muzzle against Jack's thigh. A simple gesture, but to Jack it was everything. The back door suddenly opened slightly, the light from the outside hallway casting a long streak. A young officer entered, his face still showing astonishment, but his eyes held an undisguised respect. "The court is adjourned," he announced quietly. "We will report back when there are new developments, but Mr. Dawson, you may stay as long as you wish." Jack nodded, not answering. The officer left, the door closed. The room returned to its initial stillness. Outside, everything continued. The press would jump in. Investigations would be open. Hidden hands would move again behind the scenes. But here in this room, at this very moment, only one thing existed. The bond between a soldier who had lost everything and a dog who had refused to leave him, even when the whole world saw them as a threat. And that was the reason, even if the gates of hell opened once more, they would walk through together. Nothing is stronger than a friendship that has survived war, darkness, and even the schemes of the powerful. And the real battle had only just begun. The story of Jack and Rex isn't just a survival battle, but proof of friendship beyond all limits, between human and animal, between a broken soldier and a four-legged warrior who never backed down. What do you think about sacrificing everything to save a life that once saved yours? Would you be ready to do as Jack did? If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share to spread the power of loyalty, and subscribe to not miss the next touching stories.